Hello and welcome to the Smart Divorce podcast. I am back again with the fabulous Helen Stuart from Now You're Talking. A bit of a different topic. I'm going to start with the trigger warning at the very start. We are going to be talking about suicide today. If you've been impacted by suicide from people who are close to you, friends, family, etc., and please do reach out if you do need any help. And please be aware that you might find some of the topics that we talk about today difficult. But we are hopefully going to give you some help, advice of how to deal with particularly children or teenagers, older children who are struggling. We find this a very important topic to cover. So I hope you'll bear with us and I hope that you find this a useful episode. I'm going to start by saying hello to Helen and just ask her to introduce herself briefly for those of you who haven't listened to the other couple of episodes that we've recorded together. So hi, Helen.
Hello, thank you so much, Tamsin. Yeah, so I'm Helen Stuart. I am Managing Director of Now You're Talking. We are a business that provides therapy to children, young people, adults, couples, with various different counsellors that can support with that. Really easy and accessible to find, and you can rest assured that everybody that we work with are trusted and they've got the right qualifications to do the job, whether that's working with your children yourselves or as a couple.
Fantastic, and it is an amazing service that you offer. As I said, today we're talking about a massive topic, and we're going to try and cover some aspects of it within the next sort of half hour, 40 minutes. And it's not a long time to talk about something which is a huge topic. From a personal perspective, this has impacted my family over the last 6 months, because very sadly one of my son's best friends took his own life earlier at the end of last year, which we're still all dealing with. He was a young person, 21 years old, 22 years old, and it's an incredibly hard thing to talk about, to think about, but it is a topic that I felt that it was important, whilst we were talking about the children angle of divorce, that we covered this topic. So it's not just about divorce. Um, it impacts many of us, but it is something that I wanted to talk about today. So I guess the first thing is, if you can see that your child is suffering with anxiety or depression, what are the first things that we should do?
Thank you. And thank you for sharing as well, because it's a really difficult topic and it's a really a hard thing to talk about. I think as a parent, grandparent, friend, seeing a young person struggle is really hard. I talked about that this particular generation that are kind of coming through at the moment, they are contending with a lot. There's a world that is quite scary. There is technologies arising that kind of can do so much in a good way, but also in a negative way. There was the era of social media and kind of finding all your information on there, but also this kind of never switching off culture with young people as well. So, there was a time where you would go to school, you would come home, and your day had ended. And with a lot of young people now, it doesn't end because you come home, you're on social media, you're on TikTok or whatever it is, and it just goes on. So I think firstly, when especially children, when they sort of enter kind of those teenage years, like it's no secret that they can be quite challenging. There's a lot of kind of changes going on, so scientifically around kind of brain development and that sort of thing. But there are so many things that they're contending with, whether that is exams, friendships, relationships, all of those things kind of compound it. when we're starting to kind of see young people sort of being withdrawn, a lot of the time I've talked about previously that can come out in many different forms, that whether that is anger, whether that is anxiety, whether that is, feeling down, feeling low. And I think a foundation for that is to have really open and honest conversations and make mental health a really open topic in the house as well. Which is really, really hard, especially as a parent, if you've done that before. You're then trying to pave a new way of being, open about a topic. And it can feel really, really scary. So I think kind of opening up and, creating that environment where it feels safe to be quite open about that. Which, for some children, like they really don't want to talk about it. And I get that, and it's just, I think, don't give up at the first sort of challenge that you might get back, is that keep asking, because that could be, the $1 million question that's needed, that they finally open up and sort of want to have that question. So don't be afraid. And, it does feel a little bit vulnerable sometimes, because it might mean that you might have to be open about yourself as well, and I know we all want to kind of feel like this strong person for our children, but it's absolutely okay for your children to see you cry, for them to see you, have emotion, and that's okay. So I think that's where I would say that where we can kind of start laying the foundations for those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and also encouraging your children to talk openly with their friends about how they're feeling, and
Absolutely.
to check in with their friends about how they're feeling and try and get them to open up. It's got to be a really true thing that some of the people who are really struggling mentally don't necessarily walk around looking sad.
Yeah.
They could be some of the most cheerful people, happy people, contented people, brilliant people that in your life. So checking in on those people and
Hmm.
trying to get them to open up about anything that might be going on in their world is vitally important. um I was told some time ago that it's really important to front up to, if you do think that there's any chance whatsoever that your child, friend, family member, etc., is considering taking their own life, that you should use the word, that you should ask if they're considering suicide. Um, you're nodding, so I'm assuming that I've got that I've got that bit right. And it's all right asking, and that's, I get that that's a sensible thing, but you can't ask how. Obviously you're asking hoping for a no, but you've
Hmm.
got to know what to do with it if the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So okay, we think we need to ask the question, then what do we do if we get yes?
I think it's really important. And I think that you're absolutely right. I think using the words, have you thought about harming yourself? Have you thought about dying? Have you thought about taking your own life? It's a really scary place, to ask those questions. And I think you will probably, or might be, the first person to ask that person that question.
Yeah.
And, with any question that you get asked sometimes, and you think, gosh, I've never been asked that before, it can really stop people and just go, they've asked me. So I think firstly, in it's it takes a lot of courage to ask that question, because you're absolutely right that it's the answer that we are probably most terrified about. Um, I think if someone opens up to you and tells you that they are thinking of hurting themselves, that they think the world would be best place if they weren't there, I think it's really important that we can hold that space for them, and letting them know you are so grateful that they have felt able to be able to tell that to you, because that will feel like the biggest secret or biggest thought that they have had, and it will be so overwhelming. And to be able to openly and say that, could be the difference between whether they do or they don't. So first of all, I think really hold that space, and allow the time to be able to sit and give them that space to kind of talk through that. I think there are lots of people with sort of suicidal ideation, or people that have thought about harming themselves. Kind of the advice is to go to A&E, which that it's a really important place to keep yourself safe. Go to A&E. But there are also some really great sort of sanctuaries popping up at the moment. There is a couple locally that are offering sort of drop-ins, kind of self spaces for people to go along to if they feel unsafe. Now, these are different to A&E because instead of waiting in an A&E waiting room and being waiting to be seen, you are given someone to talk to pretty much immediately, and there is a space for them. So before having those conversations, cluing yourself up with what are the options here? If this person is going to say, yes, I feel like I want to die or I want to hurt myself, what practical things can you give to them to basically say, well, this is what we're going to do? I think secondly, I think it's really something to tell someone, when they've said this, all the reasons why they shouldn't. And that's absolutely valid. And I think that's really important. But you've got to understand that this person has got to a place where they feel like nothing is worth living for anymore. So actually hearing them and taking that time to acknowledge and really listen, I think giving that space and, not listening as in like you're listening and you're waiting to give a response or you're trying to fix it. Because actually sometimes people don't want you to sit and fix, they want you to listen. So actively listen to that person. What are they talking about? What have they got to say? But then also sort of giving some sort of plan. What are we going to do from this point? What can we do to keep you safe? What things can we do right now? And they might be really, really small things. Actually, to them, it'll feel huge. It could you know, do you want me to, if it is a peer-to-peer sort of situation, ask them, do you want me to talk to your parents about this? Do you want me to, have a conversation? Try and seek their permission as much as possible because I think that it actually there are times where we can't do that and we're going to have to tell someone we're going to have to do that to keep themselves safe. But actually, they might say, yeah, I just need someone to help me have this conversation. So don't be afraid to ask that. But then also, I think it's about after those conversations, what are you going to do after that? How are you going to make sure that person's keeping safe? Is it that you need to kind of encourage them to make a phone call to the GP? Don't expect people to just do that on their own sometimes. When you're in the absolute depths of despair, making a phone call to a GP can seem like the hardest thing to do. Can you do that with that person? Can you go along to that appointment with, offer as much support as you can and really mean it when you say that you want to be. It's incredibly incredibly complex in point is that's where I would start.
Okay, that's good advice. I, I think just rewinding a little bit. You've asked the question and somebody says yes, and I think
Hmm.
absolutely right. Listening and holding the space for them is brilliant because what you must want to do is just run away then. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what. From what you've said about listening and holding the space, we should be asking more questions.
Yeah.
What else should we be asking? Like, how do we move that conversation forward from that? Yeah,
Hmm.
yes, I don't think I'm any use to the world and I think I shouldn't be here anymore. I
Hmm.
considered harming myself. I have
Hmm.
dying. Like, where do we go from that information? Because that's big for the person
Yeah.
who's hearing it for the first time, as well as it being huge for
Hmm.
the person who's
Yeah.
actually saying yes.
So I think it's important to differentiate between somebody who is feeling suicidal and then someone who has got the intent and is going to carry out that action.
Okay.
So asking somebody, do you have a plan? Have you planned this out? Do you know what you would do? Which again feels, and even
Wow.
saying that is such a hard question
Yeah.
to ask. And you, again, the response you could get could be unbelievably difficult to hear. But actually asking that and asking them to say that out loud is
Yeah.
incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Um, and then again, sort of letting that person may turn around and say, "No, I've just had these thoughts," or that person might give you quite a detailed plan of what they're going to do. At that point, I think that you're in a space there, you've got an opportunity to try and actually do something. And I would encourage that you then seek immediate mental health support at that point as well, and try and do that with them as much as possible. So whether that is, like I said, sort of attending sort of one of these sanctuaries, calling the Samaritans, which are absolutely the volunteers on the Samaritans are brilliant, and you are able to do that with the person there and then, and you can do that together. And then presenting at A&E as well is always an option. But yeah, really hard question to ask, but really important question to ask as well.
Yeah, crikey, that's a big that is a big question.
Mm.
That's really hard to deal
And
with.
it's hard because, and I think I kind of come from this. So from my own personal experience, my father died by suicide when I was 18 years old, and we had absolutely no idea he was feeling that way at all. He had suffered with his mental health for years, but never in a million years did I ever think he would contemplate taking his own life. So it was a complete and utter shock to us. So I think this comes with a caveat. Sometimes it is so difficult to, we talk about suicide prevention all the time, and I think there are things we can do. But I also think that if you've had that conversation with somebody, unfortunately, sometimes people can be so unwell that they really cannot see past that. And you can get them all the help that they can get, all the support, and that it's not a failure on your part if you've not been able to prevent that because you've done as much as you can. So I think it comes with a real caveat of that. 'Cause I think that's really important to mention. There was nothing we could have done to prevent Dad's death. I don't actually think because we were so in the dark about it. He had depression, he struggled with his mental health, but it was a time when no one really spoke about it. And so at the time, no, I don't think there was anything more that we could have done. But actually today, I think I probably would have been far more open to having that conversation. And had he verbalized that, had he said, I'm thinking about dying, like that could have been difference between that actually happening and not happening. So as scary as it feels, as daunting and vulnerable and all of those emotions that come with that, I would say, it is far better for your friend to break down and cry to you than you to have to go to their funeral because that is ultimately the reality of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's massively important that we do remember that you couldn't have we could
Hmm.
have prevented it. It yes, there are other things that we know now um that talking can massively help, that there is support out there for people, but we shouldn't, you try, you as family, as friends, you are there for your family and for your friends, and there shouldn't be any layer of guilt. So if anybody out there has lost anybody to suicide, it's they were going to do that. That's the
Hmm.
decision that they made, and there should be no guilt on it. What we're talking about today is if we feel that somebody is in those depths, that how do we go about dealing with it. And a massive thank you for sharing that, your story, because that's such a difficult story to to cope with, isn't it?
Mm. And I think, we are 15 years on from when that happened. And I would say that unfortunately, in 15 years, I don't really think we've moved on too much from there. I think suicide is still the biggest killer among men. Don't quote me off in terms of the ages. But why is this still happening? Why is this still happening to, young people, all those different things, and what do we need to change? What do we need to make better? And how do we prevent it from even getting to that point in the first place? And I think that's what we're really talking about here is that actually kind of having kind of really open and honest conversations quite early on and kind of, allowing people to be able to feel safe enough to discuss that and be open, I think is a great start. And, we've got an opportunity here with kind of again, I talk about this new generation coming through all of the time because I think that they're a generation that are being exposed to so much.
Yeah.
Um, but we've not got it right so far. So how can we try and get it right now? How can we try and fix that and create a safe space for people to feel like they can be open and talk about those challenges and talk about, some of the darkest thoughts and the darkest feelings they might have because, you know, it must be awful to hear that, to be the recipient of someone who is told that someone is thinking of taking their own life, but think how that must feel for the person that's having to verbalize it.
Yeah, you can't, can you? You can't.
No.
I think most of us can't put ourselves in that space, and
Hmm.
that's sort of one of the reasons it's so difficult is because you can't put yourself in a space where that feels like the only option, because
Hmm.
that nobody goes into it thinking there are other choices. They go down that route because that feels like the only option to them, and it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's heartbreaking. You just can't put yourself in that space at all. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. In terms of, um we've talked about options for kind of when we find somebody in a space where we feel that they're struggling so much with their
Mm.
mental health that they are considering hurting themselves in some way. What about prevention? Let's try and put a positive spin on this for a bit. So
Yeah.
obviously we're a divorce podcast, and we want to think from a parent's perspective, and we talked a couple of episodes ago about therapy for children and about helping them build up resilience. Are there
Hmm.
other options for preventing, for helping um, children and young people to talk out loud? Are there, yeah, where can they,
Yeah.
what can they do? Are there things available for them?
So I think first and foremost, I think role modeling, I think be a really positive role model when it comes to discussing mental health, because I think that if you are surrounded by uh, you know, positive adults in your life, whether that is mum, dad, grandparents, aunties, uncles, that sort of thing, that positively role model mental health and how you're feeling, kind of the check-in conversations when you come home, when they come home from school, I mean, I ask my son how if he's had a good day, like he barely tells me anything, but
It
trying to just
grunts at you.
yeah, just role modeling, kind of, and telling them about your day and be like, do you know what? I had a really hard meeting today. I came away from it and it's like, and talk about those feelings, I think it's about kind of we all kind of have these surface level conversations, but really role model that actually you are comfortable to be vulnerable and to kind of talk really openly about those feelings. So I think that's really important. Because what that then does is that it filters down to your children who then go, okay, well, this is actually okay to kind of talk about this. And you hoping that that then has a bit of a ripple effect. They then talk openly to their friends about it, and then for me, I know that I now with my children like really open about mental health and we talk about that a lot. So definitely think we can start from there. I think that schools are doing more around mental health, which is brilliant. And I think there are we've worked with a couple of schools around kind of talking about mental health and talking about the importance of kind of knowing when to seek support. Um, but we have a brilliant service NHS service in this country, which I know people have their opinions on and everything, but GPs, there are brilliant GPs out there to go and speak to and talk, tell them how you feel. Um, I think that there are, when we recognize these signs, if we think our child is struggling, again, kind of what we've previously spoke about is there is no judgment on seeking help and support. So if that is going to talk to a therapist, if that is going to talk to your GP, there are things like therapy is an incredible mechanism for helping you talk through traumas, whether that be, if you've got some anxieties, whether that is that, you're feeling low or you've got fears. We speak to a lot of children that are really frightened about going to school and trying to understand what that reason is. There are services out there that are available for you to go to. And I think what's hard is that in this country, there's an overwhelming amount of things online. It's like you don't know where to go, so you don't know what to go. So you absolutely go to the NHS and rely on the NHS, but there are other services that can help and support young people kind of navigate through those challenges because the earlier we can kind of do that, the more, we've got more of a chance of kind of helping resolve some of those issues. Now, therapy might not make things go away, but they'll give you some coping mechanisms to be able to cope with that. And then, you can do some processing, you can do some reflexive work. There is so much stuff, and it really gives people, really solid base to go on because, we are we talked about this a lot with my work with domestic abuse that we're trying to break the cycle of abuse, but there's a cycle of poor mental health that we need to break as well. And if we can break that for the next generation and say, actually, let's start you off in a good place, you will then go on and hopefully have healthy relationships. You will then have, all of those things, it can be my dream of what I want the world to look like. I do think that we can do it. We just got to all work together to be able to kind of get there, I think.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think encouraging young people to talk is is absolutely the first thing. And I think mental health is so easily hidden. If you're
Mm,
struggling with your mental health, you can hide it. If you've broken your leg or you've got chicken pox, we can see it, it's out there. But your
yeah.
mental health is on the inside, and it's because it can be so easily hidden. And so many people with poor mental health are so really very good at masking and hiding it and putting on a brave face. You know, and I do think in this country there's this stiff upper lip. I mean, that's quite an old-fashioned phrase, but
Mm.
you know, putting on a brave face and just getting on with it is kind of what you're expected to do. But actually, sometimes your mental health just floors you, and you
Mm.
need to talk, and you do need something else in by way of support. Um, just want to mention a couple of groups that have come, and you might have some that you want to mention as well. We're in South Manchester, so some of these are local to us, but I'm sure there are similar things elsewhere. So there's a running club in that operates across Greater Manchester called the Mile Shy Club. They also, as well as encouraging exercise, being really, really valuable for improving mental health, they also do have a talking shop um, where you can go along. It's lovely, friendly people. I can't even tell you how friendly the people at the Malshire Club are, but they offer the opportunity to sit and talk and to discuss things that are on your mind, which I think is absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. And then the other thing is a rugby related charity called Loose Heads, which are attempting to put a mental health lead in all rugby clubs across the UK, which it
Wow.
will just be incredible because rugby clubs are essentially the people who go there and who play there are young men, young women, and Loose Heads give them signposting, but also if there's been anything that's happened, such as unfortunately our lovely player who we lost last year, they were able to set up some sessions for our young people, our players, to come and talk about what had happened and to encourage them to talk to one another as well
Yeah.
about experiences. So yeah, just wanted to mention those two. Are there any groups that you've come across that encourage? I know there's a men's talking one, but I can't remember what it's called. They are
So there's one locally to me called it's Mental, I think, which is a men's talking group. There are a couple. So the one thing, so I follow quite closely the campaign against living miserably. So they are brilliant. So they're calm and they do an awful lot around sort of suicide prevention and kind of tools and techniques in terms of kind of how to kind of talk to people who might be experiencing suicidal ideation. But there are more and more groups sort of popping up, and I think Mind are a great directory for these kind of groups that are around because also the network of support that you have is so important. And if you are feeling lonely, suffering with poor mental health is quite a lonely experience anyway, because you do feel your brain tells you that you're on your own and, nobody cares and all those things. Like, but if you can surround yourself with, really positive, a network, um, especially as well for we've got things around young mums as well that if you've got postnatal depression, there's lots of support groups out there. So I think that I know that is more to be done in that space, but people are recognizing there is a need for this now. So I think if you are looking for some sort of group and some sort of support, um the exercise groups are huge. And so with my local gym that I go to, is all around kind of your mental health and fitness. And I think the two are so closely linked. And I think actually encouragement around that. And another point as well is that conversations and when you want to have these chats and if you want to feel like you can have a conversation with somebody about the mental health, going for a walk, I cannot stress enough how much you will get if you're on a walk with somebody, because there is something about movement and there is there is studies around this, around movement, about kind of being on a destination together and being able to talk openly and freely. So get yourselves outside to have a chat, because that is a really really important place to kind of be open and to kind of feel like you're not in the constraints or somewhere where you can't talk openly. um I would definitely encourage that.
No, I love that. And it's that being side by side instead of face.
Mm,
You can't see how the other person
yes.
is reacting and so on. There's some driving in a car, I'm sure.
Yes.
Trying to remember what his name, the DJ guy. Mm, felt like it's called Ronan, but then that doesn't sound right.
Oh, I think Roman Kemp.
Roman Kemp, thank you.
Yes.
Roman Kemp talks about because he lost his best
Yeah.
suicide. And he talks about being in a car to
Mm,
that side by side thing, and walking's the same thing. That side by side thing, it's so much easier to open up. So yeah,
so much easier.
valuable
Yeah.
advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
I would
things
definitely
are,
say, sorry, my previous work with working with young people is that when I was having difficulty kind of having any conversations, if I got them in a car and I drove somewhere, oh, totally different ball game. So definitely would encourage that.
yeah, absolutely. I think there are some walking mental health groups available as well. I think if you do want a place to talk and you do want to open up, get on Google, have a look what's available in your local area, because these groups are popping up all over the place that support activity, that support your mental health. And yeah, let's hope that we've done our little bit in encouraging people to open up, to support one another, and hopefully if we made a difference to one person by recording this podcast, it will have been worth us doing it. Is there anything else you want to add, Helen, before we finish?
Just to say, that if you are struggling, if you are in a place where you are either worried about a loved one, you are worried about yourself, there are some brilliant helplines out there. I've always mentioned, Samaritans, Mind, and the campaign against living miserably are always great. Also if you feel like you want someone to talk to, then yeah, please do reach out. I think we can drop some stuff around, kind of different advice lines and things like that. But yeah, please don't be afraid to talk, although it will feel like the scariest thing ever to do. You know, life is always worth living.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect note to end on. We will include some helplines in the show notes, so please do check those out if you or anybody that you know needs those. Thank you for listening. I hope this wasn't too painful for you, and I hope it's given you at least some ideas of how to help people in your life. Thank you so much, Helen. Massively appreciate you joining us and you being so open about your experiences as well. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
listening.